we've got a K through 12 classroom. Again, we're gonna look at SARS-CoV-2. It's 1,000 square foot, 9-foot ceilings. Let's say we've got 15 of them in the building, that are very similar to that. And let's look at two conditions. The first one of the conditions will be it's a fully occupied space, 25 students. But then we'll also look at, let's say we're de-densifying and we're going to have that to 12 students. So we'll look at both of those situations. And we'll say there's 2 adults in the space, a teacher and a parent. And let's say it's their exposure is 6 hours for that day. And we'll assume we've got an arid climate and it's a winter condition. So the relative humidity, worst case, around 20%. Light activity, we're in the classroom. Let's start with one infected person. We're going to also look at breathing and speaking. Those are your typical exploratory means that you're going to find in a classroom with asymptomatic people, right? So we're assuming that, right now in the heat of COVID, most people, the recommendations is if you're sick, don't go in, right? Stay home. You still could have asymptomatic people in there, and so the most likely means of expiration is going to be breathing and speaking. We'll start with just a medium shedder. Looking at the viral season over time, and we're not going to really focus on that a whole much. It's less important for COVID. When you're looking at flu, you can look at kind of yearly impacts on productivity and health. But right now with COVID, it's a new situation. We're dealing with it different. We've got it in there. You can do it, but it's probably best just to focus on your immediate exposure on a daily basis. But if you are going to do it, I'd set it pretty low, since we're looking at the viral season for COVID is all year, so it's through the whole school year. And then we'll start with the code or ASHRAE requirements for this space would have been 455. But in the case when you're talking, let's say we have a VAV system here, so the baseline, it's a winter conditions maybe, and the box is really clamped down, and so we're only getting a percentage of that outside air, and so something that's not it's not unreasonable to find would be something as low as 135 CFM per space. During the winter, so we'll look at that, and 255 CFM per space of recirculation air, and a MERV 7 filter. We'll start out as our baseline condition. So then going to our design, looking at what we're going to compare to. We'll bump up that outside air to not just the minimum ASHRAE recommendation, but we'll go 30% above it. And so this will be 621 CFM per space. We'll keep the recirculation air the same and bump up the filter to MERV 13. Then we'll also look on top of that, adding masks. And I'll use the hybrid layer here. So everybody's wearing masks. In schools, if they're getting PP supplied, you might actually also have surgical masks, which is a little bit better, but I'm just going to stick with the cloth mask for now. We'll also look at what happens if we bump up the relative humidity to 40%. And then I'm also going to look at adding portable air cleaners. And then I'll look at what is it if I add upper room UVGI. We'll look at all these situations to see what the impacts are for this first case study. Okay, so here's the output. Let me explain what this whole table shows. So the baseline is these first 2 columns here. So it's the breathing and the speaking conditions. So that brackets basically the potential risk that you're going to find under those conditions. 21.8% to 60.4% is the probability of infection, right? With that very low outside air, MERV 7 filter, and nobody wearing masks, right? And no other strategies in point. So it's pretty high probability of infection. The next one is the design where we're just increasing the outside air and the filter level. And then the next set here, we add masks on top of that. So mask wearing on top of that. And then on top of that, we look at what happens if I bump up the relative humidity for those next pair. Now the last couple of pairs here, I'm not adding the portable air cleaners on top of the relative humidity. In that case, I'm backing relative humidity back down, and now I'm just adding portable air cleaners. And then I'm taking the portable, for the last one, we take the portable air cleaners out, and we're just doing upper room UVGI. So that's what these represent. And then the R value, and like I said, this is like a hypothetical. What would it be if all your population was just that room itself? And so it's just another indication of what the quality of the results are. That's it. And ideally, you want it below 1. That means nobody else is getting infected when we have one person infected. And then the additional potential people that are infected after those 6 hours, that's just this probability of infection multiplied by the number, in this case, the number of students at 25. So that's what this is. So, and then if it's red, that means that this value down here is greater than 1. If it's, black, it's less than 1. So obviously, as we go from left to right, everything decreases, which is what we want to see. When we start getting all the way down these last 2 options, when we're breathing, looks like nobody may be potentially infected. The actual is going to be in between here. It's somewhere and somewhere. So I mean, and even when we're adding math, it's not, it's still, there's still a potential somebody's going to get infected, but it's much lower than from our starting point. So, these strategies definitely have an impact. Now, what happens if we add the de-densifying on top of that? So now it's at 12 students instead of 25 students. So the probability of infection stays the same based on the parameters that are used in this model. But because you have less people, you're going to have less people likely infected as a result of that, right? Because that percentage, you take that percentage times the number of people. So now we're just multiplying by 12 instead of 25. So we have a lot less number of people potentially that can become infected as a result of that. And so that's why de-densifying is a major strategy. The other thing that does, and after Danny goes through this case study on the tool, I'm going to pull in the other thing on top of that is that it also impacts the potential that you have somebody in there that's infected, which is something important to consider.
We'll start by entering the demographics and room information. So we're going to do 25 students, at least in Colorado. That seems to be more applicable to what's actually happening. Light activity, we'll do 2 adults with light activity. And then the weighted average salary, you don't need to input anything here if you don't want to. Or if it's just another measurement to show productivity lost with sick days for the adults. So like if you put 55,000 as like an average salary of the adults in this space, we'll see those results coming down. Okay, our room height is 9-foot ceilings and our area is 1,000 square foot classrooms, no UVGI, and we'll have 15 classrooms in the building. Okay, so for viral parameters, we're going to model SARS-CoV-2. We'll look at 15 minutes after the incident of expulsion. I think we're doing a 6-hour school day. 1% exposure time over the viral season. 17 sick days lost for infection. We'll leave that as the default. 1 infected person. We're going to look at breathing. I know Marcel was looking at breathing and speaking, but just for the sake of keeping it consistent. And then we'll have a medium shudder. So for our building conditions, we will do 20% relative humidity. Our baseline outdoor air is going to be 135 CFM. Recirculated will be 255. MERV7 filter. No UVGI, no portable air cleaning units, and no masks. Design will leave at 20%, but we will bump up outdoor air to 621 and recirculated air to 255, right? So with a MERV13 filter. For now, let's just see what that does to our results. So you scroll down here. The first set of graphs is the risk impact summary for adults and for kids. And this is where you'll see the dollar amount here. So if I put $0 in for weighted salary, these numbers here would just be 0. But what it's showing you is that your design number of adults infected per viral season goes from 9 to 3 by making these changes in the space, which is 6 less adults infected per viral season. And if you multiply that by 17 days lost per each individual, that's getting you this decrease in salary dollars lost per viral season. There's obviously more kids, and that's what we tend to care about. So we'll focus on these graphs here. So just like Marcel's table showed, this is showing you that per day, per room, the baseline conditions, 5.5 children would be infected per day, per room with our baseline conditions. And once we increase outdoor air and increase our filtration, that's going to 1.8. So 3.7 less children are infected per room per day. And then we have child days lost here too, which I know a lot of districts kind of care about those numbers, so that's available. Then we have probability of infection. So these gray numbers here is what Marcel's table was showing. So we have the design versus the baseline, and then the decrease per day and per viral season. So our baseline 21.8% probability of infection, and with those couple changes to the design classroom, it's dropped to 7, which is a 14.8% decrease. Our next table here is removal efficiencies, and this is, you know, I focus on the totals here, which is showing you that the removal efficiency of the virus 15 minutes after the incident of expulsion is 75.5% with our design and only 34% with the baseline. And you'll see that, you know, obviously the relative humidity inactivation is nothing because we didn't change that between the design and the baseline. We only changed ventilation and filtration. And then finally, this is the R value that we're talking about here. So this is showing you that our baseline is 5.8 and design is 1.9. That still means, because that's greater than 1, that means more people are leaving the space, if that's our total population, sick than who entered the space. And just to show you, I know Marcel looked at masks, portable air cleaning units, and relative humidity. We're just going to look at masks first. So the hybrid cotton, 1 layer. Marcel, did you model 100% of people wearing masks? I think you're saying it.
Yeah, I did, 100%.
Okay, and then this 100% does take into consideration that there will be kind of some misfitting of masks, so that rule of thumb of how many people are actually wearing it, 100% is still going to take into account some people aren't wearing them correctly. Okay, so now again, as we scroll down to the kids, we see that number of infected per day drop even more. So now only 1.2 kids are infected per room per day. Here we have the design infection per day percentage dropping to 4.8%. So that's a 17% decrease per day compared to, like, I think it was 14 in our last example. And our design removal efficiency went all the way up to 81.9%, and our R value decreased to 1.3. Let's look at relative humidity. So if we increase our design relative humidity to 40%, then again, we'll see those similar differences that Marcel's table showed. So decreases in child infection per day, that didn't drop, I don't think.
There isn't, yeah. After doing all the other stuff, the impact of relative humidity is relatively small. If you did it first, it would be larger, but overall, it's still less than the other strategies typically. Depends on the room size to a degree, but most of the time, it has less of an impact.
But now you can see this relative humidity inactivation efficiency is 3.8% by doubling it. So